and welcome to the latest episode of the modestly entitled Rob Harkavy interviews, exclusively on Out News Global. Now, although we live in a world with more media outlets than ever before, it still remains the case that what we see, read and hear is not always an accurate representation of the society we live in. And that's why the Out News Global, and in fact my personal editorial line, has always been a commitment to amplifying the voices of the underrepresented and the marginalised. And it is with that in mind that I want to say a massive Out News Global welcome to the producer of a new film called The Smell of Cut Grass, Sarue Marafu, and its writer and director, Levi Aluade. Hello, Sarue and Levi.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules, your busy showbiz schedules, to join little old us today. We are very, very honoured. Now, before we lash on and we talk about your latest project, and I know the audience is going to want to hear about that, otherwise you wouldn't be on. But I want to talk to you something I touched on in my introduction about representation of minorities in the media, and especially the minorities which you're part of, which is queer people of colour. Where do you think we are in the UK right now? What have we got right? What have we got wrong? And what do we need to do?
You know, I feel like when it comes to LGBT voices, I think what we're seeing is, representation in two aspects, whether it's to meet a quota or it's genuine. And I still feel like it's 50-50 at the moment, and there's not enough genuine representation of people from that background.
So is your suggestion that maybe some producers or decision makers are saying to themselves, from a sort of tokenistic point of view, shit, we better get a black person in here to kind of mix up the ethnicities to look good, rather than being committed to amplifying marginalised voices? Is that the suggestion?
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes it's almost like automatic, and so maybe we're seeing a build-up of this now, and people haven't been thinking about it in a macrocosmic way. You will usually find, like, if there's one gay character in something, that it's also a black person. And it's almost like, yes, we're ticking both the boxes in one character, and someone actually the other day, one of the actors in this film, she sent me an article about East Asian representation in the LGBT community. And I hadn't really thought about it all that much because it came natural to me in making this story. But actually, when I think about it in the industry as a whole, especially in Britain, I have really only seen maybe one or two characters in anything that represented with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to rack my brains. I think you're right. Very, very thin on the grass, or perhaps the cut grass. Sorry. So I touched a little bit on sort of intersectionality and the telling of black and queer voices, and so as stories. And so I can't ignore the eruptions that were happening earlier this year with Pride in London, where, as you know, there were mass resignations because of allegations of racism within an organisation that almost by definition is meant to be inclusive. And obviously, I don't want you to comment specifically on Pride in London, but would you agree that people of colour have been traditionally marginalised within the sort of overall UK LGBTQ+ community?
I think that is probably the same in most countries around the world. I think, race relations are relative to the region and to different communities. So within every community, there's going to be some sort of divide. And I think in the LGBT community, you know, I'm sure there are plenty of people who are gay and still racist. You know, I think sometimes we try to make things simpler, we try not to think about people who could be a couple of isms, who could be this and this.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that becomes very difficult for people to understand. Um, and it's just a example of how complicated the world is and how we are as people. I think to be inclusive has to be something that is a singularity. So it doesn't just mean inclusive within this society. It needs to be inclusivity as a whole, before anyone can feel comfortable.
I think, yeah, I mean, it's the old thing, until everyone is free, none of us is free. So anyway, on to The Smell of Cut Grass. Sarue, you're the producer, but you've commissioned Levi to both write it and direct it. What was it about Levi's work that led you to approach him?
Honestly, I kind of felt like their work was really, really honest. One of the things that was really important to me is I wanted to tell a queer story. I wanted to tell a queer story from a queer lens, so something that didn't hetero-splain, anything, or try to make it, um, or try and dilute an everyday life. I wanted, sort of like what I said to Levi when I first met them, to say I wanted like a New Yorker equivalent of a New Yorker going, we're walking over here, just doing them, and just living life as truthfully and as honestly as possible. Something that had nuance, something that had an ability to touch and to speak to an entire community of people without really sort of trying to cater or soften or, kind of feel stereotypical. That was my objective to start off with. And Levi, my goodness, I am such a fan. I am such a fan of Levi. I'm a fan of the way that they think. I'm a fan of the way that they sort of see just the community as a whole and the expectations they have on it. I remember during our first initial conversation with the piece, I remember I told them everything that I was trying to get, and Levi was like, "Yes, I get it completely." It was literally just the both of us going, "Same, same," and that made sense to me.
Maybe he
It's
says
really
that, Sarue, maybe he says that to all the producers just to get throwing it out
think that, but
Whatever, I agree, give me the gig.
it's kind of really important to also realize that I didn't just choose Levi. I spoke to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I spoke to a lot of people, and I would love to think that like my little bullshit detector is quite good. But it was really kind of, and honestly, the smell of cut grass is proof of that. It's proof that there is a way to tell queer stories and do so in a way that is so authentic and so real, and really kind of add to the narrative in a way that is innovative. And that was really important as well. And also just try and spear it forward rather than just adding to something that may not necessarily be true. um but yeah, I think that was generally quite it. And I also think that one of the things that I also loved is that Levi's inclusion of an East Asian queer person into the story was something that Levi did without thought. And I'm not naive enough to think that there is equality amongst, the inequalities. There's always something that is, that somebody will feel like inferior about or superior about, even when you yourself are marginalized. And there is that sort of step that you kind of have to take in order for you to actually look at the world and say, okay, no, that's not okay, even within our community. And Levi was just doing it, like it came automatically and naturally to them, and I was just like, yes, here for it.
Levi, before your head gets too big to fit in the frame, we haven't got a wide angle lens. You're the writer, so without spoilers, can you set up The Smell of Cut Grass for us? Tell us what we can expect.
I can tell you that it is a film about a gardener who does a job and is invited into these people's homes, a couple and another character called Hanji, into their home for dinner, and we kind of see the community of human beings, really. Like, it's just the community of people and seeing what it means to find a safe place and find people who care about you. Yeah,
Okay.
you can expect food and lots of gardening.
You know, that's my weekends. So did you have a separate casting director, or the two of you cast it together?
No, I think I cast everyone through like private channels. Like, some people I had met before and had worked with, and others I had wanted to work with but hadn't worked with yet, and they'd read some of my stuff before. And then some of them I just happened to see or meet during the time we were making it through other projects or like other people. And everyone kind of came together unanimously. It was a beautiful, beautiful cast that we had.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't wait to see it. Now, Levi, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, because Sarue was late because she's very show busy and was probably on the phone to somebody far more important in Los Angeles or something. That'd be the middle of the night there. But anyway, obviously somebody far more. But we were talking about directing your own stuff, and talked about how some directors don't like the writers on the set because they like to do a little bit of chopping and changing and what they might call improving. And it's a bit like us journalists have with the sub-editor, where you write stuff and it gets chopped and changed a little bit. But you directed your own script. So do you feel you missed out on having those sort of checks and balances, or actually was it quite a relief not to have to answer to anybody on set?
I kind of, I think, you know, I've grown into the idea that the writer and the director are very different jobs. And so once once we start prepping and we're like, okay, we're going to cast now, we need to plan how we're going to shoot. At that point, the writer head is gone. Like, I am only thinking about what is the movie that we can shoot on set and what is the best way we can make that. And even in editing, we'll cut out lines or change things, because you're kind of in conversation with something, so you can't get stuck. Change is a part of it. The evolution of it is sort of the art. You need to like absorb it and play with it. That's kind of like a lot of what is going on in the world now. It's like we need to go with the change more, and then we can learn, and then we can react to what we're making and doing, and what we want to see in the future and the product of all of this love. So yeah, from now it's like, okay, I've written a script, now I'm directing the film. And then, yeah.
The Smell of Cut Grass fits into a series called Pieces, which you're obviously producing it all, Sarue. Can you tell us a little bit more about Pieces and where A Smell of Cut Grass fits in?
Pieces was something that I curated out of frustration, I would say. I think I can't remember what I was watching, but I was watching another program about Black people and trauma. And it was just, I thought to myself, okay, that's great, but there's just so many more levels to us and so many nuances to the different types of, we're humans, good god, it's like we're Black people, they're just humans, we are different from each and every single one of us. So I commissioned 4 different writers, all Black, to come up with a piece that was true to themselves. The fact that Levi directed it is not an accident from my point. I wanted the story to have as much of a follow through as possible, to keep the intention and the heart of it as close as possible. So I didn't want it to go through so many sort of little bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So yeah, Pieces, I named it after Rumi. Rumi is this 13th century Persian poet who said that love is the whole thing, we are just pieces. The assignment was that each writer had to write their authentic truth as a response to what they believe or what they would quantify as Black love. And everybody came at it very differently. We had a writer called Annie Domingo, who is in her late 70s, and she wrote about the relationship between two women, a friendship, the idea that true love doesn't necessarily have to be a lover. And then we had Levi's story, which was about self-love and about the love of a safe space and the community around you and what that means. Kalungi, he wrote a piece about loving yourself by getting to know yourself as a child of the diaspora. And Saida is an amazing actress and writer with cerebral palsy, and she went and she tackled disability and sexuality in a way that just is so funny. It was all about just sort of figuring out all the different sort of stories that everybody can come with as truthfully as possible. And I'm so proud of this series. Everybody, they're completely different, by the way.
Yeah.
None of them are the same. The tones are different, the looks, the feels. I wanted them to be as individual as each
Yeah, yeah.
of the pieces are. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Where can we catch the series and more relevantly, The Smell of Cut Grass itself? When and on what platforms?
Well, my goodness. We're gonna release it absolutely everywhere. At the moment, it's literally in post, and it's awful because right now I keep seeing cuts of it, and then I keep seeing Levi's messages going, "Oh God, Sarue, today is the greatest day we've added this, and it's amazing." And that's literally my existence right now. We will probably have it's gonna go for the festival circuits of, and then we're going to have a sort of mass screening session at the end of summer, just to kind of get all the pieces together and to introduce them to the world.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'll look forward to that. So, Sarue, Marafu, and Levi Aluade, I want to thank you both for joining us today, but also for giving a voice to so many people whose voices often struggle to be heard. It's a very important thing that you do, and I have loved talking to you both. So thank you once again, and I wish you both much love, luck, and happiness. Thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. What you're doing is so important as well. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.